Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here to review Needful Things. So, this, of course, is another Stephen King film. And this is probably going to end up being a backup video today because I don't know if I'm going to go on and be able to actually do the video I was planning on doing today. Because the thing that I'm going to cover ends up going uh, on live at some point, and I'm not quite sure if I'm going to watch that and be awake or coherent enough after that finishes to then do a video on it because I changed my sleep schedule. I'm under the weather, and also the headphones that I would even go on to have used to have watched this they're kind of very rickety to even go on and to have used those. So I was like, great, we are ice skating uphill today. And I was like, well, um, that always is to be just like, well, yeah, yeah, that's the way we always got to do it. Because if it wasn't like that, then like I don't know, I just think it wouldn't be that challenging. So speaking of challenging, the thing that you guys are all waiting for is this review. So let's talk about it. Needful Things. Needful Things is the closest to a wish fulfillment movie. I say that because we have a character that comes into this town named Gaunt who is to make a bargain with these people, but I don't feel that exactly he always has the catchphrase of uh, tell me what you desire, or what is it that you wish, or something like that. It seems that what he goes on and kind of does that maybe in the very first one and gets that maybe phrasing kind of somewhere in there. But so we have Gaunt that is to be an antique store, that is to be a catch-all kind of thing. This guy has anything more than a Amazon. So yeah, this guy should be a trillionaire, but he's not. And he's to only go on and affect this one town that ends up being Castle Rock. Castle Rock is to, of course, go on and be the staple of settings for Stephen King movies and shows and what have you, even to a point where one show is actually to be called Castle Rock. Come to find out, the sheriff that is to be in this movie is actually the same sheriff, I think, in the movie Dark Half, who is played by Michael Rooker. So, completely different actors. Michael Rooker isn't to be the sheriff in this movie, it's to be Ed Harris. So, also, there is to be a miniseries done by Stephen King called Storm of the Century, and I'll go on to briefly explain that a little bit later when I start to compare things to this bit of content. But anyways, Needful Things. We have a character, Gaunt, that comes in here. He sets up this antique store, and people start one by one to come into it, and they have whatever they are to go on and specifically always ever wanted, or in this case, needed. So, as well as also, this story is the title of the movie. So, we have Gaunt that goes on and makes this bargain with these people. All right. And he's like, all right, like, well, what kind of money do you have on you? Oh, okay, well, $20. Yeah, that's great. But you know what would be a little bit to sweeten the deal if you go on and you do a certain kind of task for me. You know, a certain kind of prank, a certain kind of thing that you'll never go on and be accused of because the person won't know it's you. Because if anything, the entire movie, this person is going to go on and accuse so and so other person, and that'll lead to them going on and fighting almost to the death and killing one another. But hey, you'll never go on and you'll never know that, or maybe some of them will know, uh, but they probably won't care, or maybe they will care and they'll put a gun to their head, and that kind of gets to a wow kind of scene going on in this film. But there'll be some wow moments, but I'll go on and I'll explain because some stuff doesn't logically mesh up in my brain what goes on in this film and could greatly affect my grading or not. Uh, Also, if you are to be people that do not like dogs that die in a film, which technically the death kind of happens off screen, but then you're going to go on and you're going to see a skinned dog at some point in this film, which only is to be shown within seemingly seconds of this movie. So, by all means, if you don't want to go on and see that scene, Nettie goes into her house and is to seemingly be opening a door, opens the door, skinned dog, number of seconds, which is like 5 to 10 seconds. You can kind of look away and whatever and kind of watch the rest of the film. There are maybe two jump scares that happens in this movie, but I don't even think the first jump scare was all that scary. Nettie is to be at this door. Ed Harrison's sheriff character kind of goes in front of the door, and that wasn't even scary to me. Maybe it was scary a number of years ago, but isn't scary now. So however your level of scare factor. There's at some points when people get killed and we see the blood and stuff all just kind of displayed. Um, so depends on your level of tolerance of things. I feel like I have to over explain this, but I just want to be nice to the people that have their certain level of acceptance of things. I don't know. Anyways, so I didn't think that this movie was really scary at all, but regardless, people may feel that way. Because most of it is just focusing on the bargains of things and then the chaos that builds in the town. That's not really scary. But anyways, so these pranks all happen that leads to the people accusing people. People get into fights, and then this gets around all over goddamn town. And this starts to create this chaos, these rioting in the streets, and goes on to have this town almost literally exploding. But really, if you honestly think about it, the guy who's be the explosive character isn't to be all that well of figuring out how much explosives to actually use to take down a town. So, but regardless, explosives anyways, because we have to have a big explosion to kind of wrap up this film. But anyways, so now we have to go on and talk about the sheriff here. So the sheriff is to go on and is to have been a person who is to be a big fish in a small pond, because he had gone on to a big town that was kind of riddled with chaos, to the point of him making his way to Castle Rock because he wanted to hope that he can go to a small town where nothing ever happens, but he'd be wrong. He'd be going to a small town at the very wrong time. Probably going on and thinking like, dude, I'm not going to live here. F this noise. I'm moving elsewhere. But also, it seems that Gaunt is to tell him otherwise, bizarrely. And tells him exactly in 2050 something that he'll come back. So I am to go on and talk about the sheriff here, Alan. Simply because at one point we have a conversation being had between Gaunt and the sheriff, and the sheriff mentions that it was to have at one point punched somebody, and he thought it was wrong, so he decided to leave that town to go to this smaller place to find religion and and seek out forgiveness. Good for him. So Alan goes on to really go into this town realizing that he doesn't really need anything from Gaunt, that it seems that his life is perfect. And Alan goes on and talks to Gaunt about him punching this guy in his past. And Gaunt goes on and says, yeah, sometimes people need killing. I'm sorry, punching a guy and killing, they don't make sense with one another in this bit of dialogue here. I guess level of harm to a person, but like you probably could have gone on and adjusted that dialogue to say it's like, well, hey, I'm sure even you as a sheriff at some point would probably have to have turned a gun on somebody and had to have shot them. So yeah, like people deserve killing. That's what he could have gone on and actually said. But no, like immediately he just says like, well, yeah, some people just deserve killing. Or punching, not killing. But then also we have to assume that when Gaunt eventually does the bargain, he can start just having his way with these people. And with the exclusion of maybe Brian, the kid, having a conscience in this film, we have everyone else that seemingly so easily gives in to Gaunt that it actually doesn't make sense. Yeah, we have certain people that are to probably have an alcoholic persuasion that has them given to so easily of Gaunt. We have some people that are probably to just be so the butt of a joke of this town, or to maybe in some part of their mind already be a crazed person or an a-hole that they so easily give in to Gaunt. Uh, and then also we have a person that I guess is to have been put through so much pain because arthritis that they end up in bed with Gaunt, just because they are to be cured of their ills, and could go on and be just so overly persuaded by Gaunt because magic necklace. I just don't quite understand logically in my brain just how a kid can just so easily figure out what is going on with Gaunt compared to anyone else in this entire goddamn town. Uh, but I guess when you have to go on and you have a kid that just thinks that, oh yeah, like these pranks that I'm doing won't hurt anybody, but he is like patient zero of this whole thing. And then when he finds out that it leads to people's deaths and no one else has gotten that far, that's when Brian is realizing what's going on here, and he then is to tell the sheriff what's what. And the sheriff is to be like, aha, all right, like, thanks, kid, for letting me know. And then he's going to go on and kind of champion and try to uh, blast guns in the air and tell everybody what's going on. And that luckily Brian was the one who figured this all out. So, speaking of guns in air, we also have at one point where uh, Brian the kid is to go on and be so upset by the fact that his pranks had led to people's deaths that he goes on and takes a gun to his own head. So I want to brace people of that, for if you don't like a lot of movies that have kind of a lot of different kind of things, like any of the things that I probably mentioned, this movie may not be for you. But again, I probably want to more tell everybody what's going on so they can be aware of it. So what is this movie to go on and be similar to, like, comparison ways, or in comparison ways? Firstly, I'll have to go on and I'll have to say that this movie is to be compared to uh, the series, the show, American Gothic. There's to be a sheriff in that town that seemingly is to be said to be possibly a devil-like character. He goes on and manipulates the town. American Gothic, rarely have seen that show. I think at some point I may have gone on and might have had a at some point an interest in seeing the show, but I never really latched onto it. But it's fairly similar to this. I would go on and compare this show to the movie franchise Wishmaster, because logically you have a main character that figures out a way to unleash this djinn, and this djinn is trying to get these three wishes to this main character, and all the while the djinn is also the evil genie, is to be granting wishes to random people that they find, and a lot of those wishes just start to create chaos throughout eventually the entire city, and then by the end of this film, it all builds up to like the city that they're in, like almost erupting, with all the chaos and all the horror that is going on throughout, these either wishes or just hell just coming to Earth, almost it seems. So, very much similar in that aspect of things. We can almost go on and probably say, uh, God, there is this one Slime Bolarama kind of goofy film where we have this imp that is to go on and grant these wishes to these college students as the guys are pulling the pranks on the girls, and then they go to this bowling alley, and same kind of similar with film. The wishes I think go cattywampus on a lot of the people. Yeah, similar. Uh, we also have Storm of the Century, which is to kind of a warlock or wizard like guy who is to state that he is dying, as he's lived for probably hundreds and hundreds of years, but he realizes that his time is up and he wants to have an apprentice. So he comes to this town and starts to tell everybody within this small town all of their sins, and is to then, after killing people and wreaking havoc on this town, turns to the people of the town and says, "Hey, if you guys want me to leave, like all you have to do is give me one of your kitties, and then I will be gone from you from whatever. But you're never ever gonna go on and see your child again. But guess what? I'll be gone from your town. But until then, I'm just gonna start wreaking havoc all over your town and start killing people. Even if you imprison me, that's gonna mean dick because freaking." I'm freaking. I'm gonna have a party, and I'm gonna kill people because I can and I will. So, Storm of the Century, a pretty good miniseries. I reviewed the whole thing on this channel. You can check it out, but do it if you want. Uh, the Jack Black Goosebumps movies. One monster leads to five, leads to 10, leads to a shitload, and eventually they start all wreaking havoc upon this town. So that, in a way, is quasi similar to this, in a way of a town that ends up getting uh, chaotic because of a thing happening to it, which is to be a bunch of monsters unleashed onto a town. So that is to be somewhat similar to what kind of happens in this movie, in a ballpark way of sorts. So, with that said, now that I've gotten that all out of my brain noggin, I think it's about that time to just go on and probably uh, feel safe enough that I feel like I've gotten everything out of my brain to hope to get into spoiler territory, because also it's about 19 minutes anyways. Um, I really did enjoy this movie. I thought at the end of the day, there is probably a number of things that will go on and have people go click at some point, but I was to go on and enjoy the chaos that ensued within this film, and I thought at the end of the day, Needful Things was okay. I've seen worse off films lately than this, so, and plus also I was biasly having an enjoyment to this film because of the whole wish fulfillment kind of angle. So if you don't like wish fulfillment movies, this movie may not be for you, and maybe the number of content that I had said beforehand may go on and be more interesting to you, the viewer. But anyways, I think it's about that time to go on and say where can you go on and watch Needful Things if you want to go on and decide to do so after all the things that I yayed or nated. Because at the end of the day, I also okayed it. Wouldn't recommend it for everybody, but F it. Uh, so by the end of it all, if you were to not want to go on and definitively rent this movie, because why would you? Because some of them have it for $3 and some of them have it for 14. F that noise. I'll go on and be able to give you certain apps so you can watch this movie for absolutely free. If you have a mobile or tablet or an iPad device, which I would definitely recommend iPad or tablet just because bigger screen, but also that you can see a number of things for absolutely free: movies, shows, web series, anime. Well, maybe not all anime. You would probably have to have a specific anime app that I'll go on and I'll mention to you if you go on and ask for it because I don't have the name off the top of my head. Um, it's probably like Anime Go Go or something like that. It's quasi some kind of name that's ballparkingly like that. But the first thing of app that I'm going to recommend to you is Zelifonic, Zelivonic. I just used that app to watch this movie for absolutely free. And also, I could recommend a app called Moopsy, Moopzzi. Justifiably enough, Moopsy kind of deals with more server stuff. So if you go into the source part of the app, because maybe the movie may not play right away, or maybe the movie will be something else rather than what you were to go into it for, then by all means go into the source part of it, adjust to get a different server, and then watch the film. But anyways, let's go on and let's pause this review here and go into the shtick that I go into, where I basically re-explain the whole entire film for you, or with you if you want to watch it. And uh, there are often times that I probably don't go on and have side things of bits of content. Maybe every once in a while I have a joke here or there, but dare say I try as much as possible to get this video done as quickly as possible, because I realize how long it gets when we have to explain these movies. So, with that said, I think it's about that time to just go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. Let me know in the comments below what is be your favorite wish fulfillment film. Because at the end of the day, maybe you know some random wish fulfillment movie that I've never gone on and seen, or maybe you are to have a wish fulfillment movie that I'd be like, oh yeah, I've seen that movie. That movie's freaking great. Or maybe you'll probably have gotten suckered into a video like this because of some tag that I probably had that was connected to this film, or maybe some Stephen King thing, which I probably will tag this also with that. So regardless, I've watched a number of Stephen King bits of content. You can check all of those out, and I'm sure the playlist that probably says Stephen King movies down below in the playlists and what have you. Uh, I apologize for people probably needing to probably scroll at some point to probably find those. Find a lot of random because I've reviewed a lot of random in my time here. But anyways, let's pause here. Let's get out the cast list wherever I insist is to help me go on and sploo this movie out. So without a doubt, let's go on. Let's do that so I can get this underway and content done. So thank you for going on and watching this, because I know you may jump off at this point, but thank you for going on and doing so. All right. So in the very beginning of Needful Things, we do the cliche opening of every movie that we've probably ever gone on and seen in our life, where we go to a location, we have these scenery shots. That's how they always go on, and they open every like once they go to these locations and they use certain scenes like, yeah, they open up the movie with these like, oh yeah, let's do these helicopter just kind of pan shots. And then now that we have things like drones, yeah, we can definitively even do these even more so in a lot of these projects and a lot of these things. So we have this car that's shown here, who of course is Gaunt's car, and we have him go flying by this sign that says Castle Rock, a nice place to love and grow, or to live and grow. My bad. I can barely read the sign. So we have Nettie, who is to go on and be a person that works in this diner, who's kind of poking her head out of these kind of these blinders or these curtains, and or blinders, curtains, whatever the things here to just kind of look out the window here. So Nettie and both Polly are talking about how this new building is to go on and seemingly be very suspicious, and we even have Nettie that states that she's probably never going over there, and they're not sure what this new business is. Plus, also with it just kind of being called Needful Things, yeah, like there's a lot of questions to be had there. But I think Polly wants to go on and be just kind of nice and neighborly, and like it seems that eventually once people are to meet with this guy, it seems that he's very nice. So here's where the sheriff Allen kind of bursts his way into this door, scaring Nettie a little bit. Uh, we have Allen that goes on and meets Nettie's dog, who is Raider, and it seems that this dog is seemingly to be friendly. Uh, and Alan is to go on and kind of grab on it. This dog's to be like a Rottweiler, so I'm like, wow, okay, like this dog, it seems to be actually pretty friendly with it being a Rottweiler. But anyways, so then again, like I think probably Rottweilers probably get a bad rap also, uh, most of the time. Anyways, so Alan is to go on and be talking to Nettie, but like, well, hey, is Polly around? Um, And Nettie's like, well, yeah, of course, it's lunchtime. And so Alan goes on to show Nettie here that he's here not only to eat a meal, but he's actually there for a very specific reason. And he's there to pop the question. He shows Nettie the ring in its case. I think it's he just has it closed and just kind of like, hey, like look what I'm here for. And then he's like, ah, and it's like, hey, like, so Alan goes on and he sits at the counter to have Polly come in, and so he tries to order this meal, and like it's kind of funny because like Polly thinks that Alan is gonna get the normal like smoked turkey on rye, but Alan's like, no, 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 no. Like, how about you go on and you make one of your specials for today? And then Pauline tells Alan, it's like, well, no, 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 no. Like, don't get this special today. And he's like, don't get this special. And so he's like, okay, well, I'll just have a smoked turkey and rye. So it's like, okay, and like, so we have Alan that says like, well, hey, like considering it feels like a very special day today, like how about I go on and get a slice of Nettie's apple pie while we're at it? And so Polly ends up asking Alan, it's like, well, hey, how's your day going so far? He's like, a little crazy actually. Uh, did I tell you I got the photos back? Polly will go on and she'll look at the photos and she'll be like, like I look a little fat here, I look a little this here, a little that. And so we have Nettie that kind of interrupts the bit of conversation here, and she slaps this, what I guess would be an ad in this either newspaper. I'm assuming it's a newspaper, and it's talk about needful things, and it has its grand opening tomorrow. So Alan is to start asking around of like, will anybody know who the new owner is? Nobody has really any clue, because nobody's probably seen anyone come in or out from that place. So plus also with a probably devil running the store, like I'm sure he doesn't actually need stock boys or cashiers or anything making their way through that place. So we have Brian that is on his dirt bike, making his way through the town, and then eventually going on to halting his bike very easily and very quickly here. And the interesting part about this is like we kind of interrupt our regularly scheduled program of Alan going on and actually proposing to Polly here by doing this whole bit of dialogue between both Brian and both Gaunt here, which seemingly takes a very long time here. Um, but anyways, so Brian goes on to again. He has his dirt bike. He kind of he gets off his bike. He makes his way to Gaunt's place as it seems that he's hoping that someone is to actually be within the store. And we have a woman that was like, well, hey, like, shouldn't you be in school? And he's like, I have a cold. So Brian ends up wiping one of the windows and looks into it and starts to see an odd ball of items. And the store says open on it. So, grand opening tomorrow? Maybe that's today. So, we have Brian that makes his way through the store, and really it's just a bunch of like it's a normal house looking store. So Brian is making his way through rooms that have paintings on it. He's looking up the stairwell. He's making his way through these painted hallways, these hallways with paintings on it. So eventually Gaunt ends up meeting with Brian, and he explains to Gon, it's like, oh, hey, well, your door was open, and, like, I didn't just bust in. And Gon is like, well, of course not. We're, we're welcoming people in because we're open. And Gon tells Brian, it's like, oh, you've been here before? Since when? Uh, so, but Gaunt is to tell Brian that he never forgets a face. Uh, so the two of them are to go on and introduce one another. So I guess Gaunt doesn't really forget a face, but probably doesn't know a name. So, so the two of them introduce one another, and so Gon ends up going to the question to Brian of what exactly he fancies. What does he like most? Going on to ask him, it's like, well, hey, um, like, do you like dirt bikes? Do you like uh, Walkmans? Like, what do you like? And Brian's like, well, like, I already have all those. So the two of them, it seems, are nearby a window, and they notice two people who it seems are to own a farm, and one of them is Wilma and her husband. So Wilma, it seems, will go on and eventually have Brian be done a prank on her, and Wilma thinks that the prank was actually done by Nettie, who's the girl in the diner. So, but anyways, back with uh, both Brian and Gaunt here. So, the further that Gaunt is trying to exactly figure out what Brian's real true interest is, eventually Gaunt does figure out that it seems that Brian likes baseball cards because he would go on and collect baseball cards with his father. And it seems that they would go on and collect all of these other cards, but the only card he could never go on and get is a Mickey Mantle card because of how expensive it is. And so we would conveniently go on to have Gaunt that is to go on and, of course, have this card. And because, of course, like this is to be whatever the person wishes or whatever the person is to have as its deepest desire is, of course, what Gaunt has. And so, plus also, Gaunt states about how a Mickey Mantle card would probably cost like hundreds of dollars, like $600-700 and what have you. And Brian only actually has like probably 98 or 97 cents to his bate. But anyways, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. And so we transition back to the diner. And so here's where both Alan and both Polly, they're looking at the photos, and Polly is very much over critiquing about her photos, and eventually Alan does go on, and while they're talking, he pops the question to her and says, "Will you marry me?" And Polly says to Alan, "It's like, well, yeah, whenever you're serious about it." And so Polly just kind of just leaves and is to just think nothing of it. And Alan is like, Polly, like, I'm serious. Like, I have the wedding ring right here to propose to you. And then Polly's like, like really kind of catching her off guard because like this guy was getting down on one knee. Like this guy just kind of randomly says this. Plus, also, like, I'm very confused. Like, they had just had this newspaper that says that this store is opening tomorrow, but then it seems that the store is already opening. So I'm like, how much time is even passing here? This is so confusing. But anyways, uh, but I guess it really doesn't matter because I guess the newspaper, if you edited that out, like the store would already be open. So the newspaper kind of is a dumb thing that is to be plopped in here. But anyways, so unless they add a bit of dialogue that kind of just explains that away. Moving on. So now back with Gaunt here. So we're kind of we're kind of getting into two different stories at once here. God goes on to bring to Brian the Topps 1956 Mickey Mantle card. We get into very specifics about the exact Topps year, character, because if you're a collector, you have to get to that narrow specifics. Because, yeah, like certain collectors are to need a specific. It can't just be any Mickey Mantle card. It has to be an exact card to complete an exact collection. So, coincidentally, also, this card is to specifically be having a signature that is to say to my good friend Brian doesn't make any sense. A lot of times you go on and you'll find a signature thing that does have a bit of like whatever tailored to that specific person, but a lot of times they won't specifically match to that exact person. But regardless, this is wish fulfillment stuff that's going on here. So it doesn't really have to make any real sense. So, and Brian says how impossible it is that that card was to specifically be so tailored perfectly to him and have the Mickey Mantle signature. Plus, also, this card was to not be in any plastic covering or to be graded either. So, yeah, this is probably a sign of the times that this card isn't probably going to be as valuable because it's not graded. But anyways, uh, so Brian does take the card from Gaunt, and immediately he gets sucked in to this game, and so we have to go on and assume that immediately once Brian in hand takes this card, he's going to go on and make a deal with Gaunt, regardless of how much this thing actually costs. So we are now back with Alan and Polly here. And Alan is to ask Polly about the ring as he puts it on, and Polly can't breathe yet, and Alan makes a joke that he had gotten it off TV, so he's kind of a little concerned about how it looks, and Polly looks at Alan like, "Ah, oh, you such a liar! Like I'm sure you went to the jewelry store, or like I'm sure you spent a lot of money on this." So Alan ends up asking Polly, it's like, well, does that definitively mean yes, that you'll marry me? And Polly agrees and says yes. So here's where we go on and we have Gaunt and we have Brian, and they're working up the cost of how much money Brian has on him, and then how much that logically Brian in the early stages of this movie is going to have to work off with this task, with this offer, with this side offer. So, Brian has 95 cents. My bad. I thought it was 98 cents. So, Gaunt tells Brian, it's like, well, like, that's not quite enough. But if anything, other arrangements could happen here. So, Gaunt says that the 95 cents is like half of the price of this item, we'll say. But uh, the rest will have to go on and have Brian have to do a deed, and it's like, a deed? What is that? It's like, well, it's a trick. It's a tiny prank. No big deal, and no one will ever suspect it's you. I promise. Uh, do you remember the lady we peeked at buying feed across the street? That, of course, is Wilma, the girl that I talked about, that has that farm, the turkey farmer. Uh, and so Gon ends up asking Brian, "Hey, do you know where she lives? Because you're gonna do a prank on her." So Gon had originally been in the town of Ohio. He says, specifically in the early parts of this film, that he was from Akron, I believe. And so we come to find that he has this book, and he had gone on to Akron and had all these names in this book that he at some point checked and crossed and all these kinds of things off. And he had gone on to turn to this open page and wrote Castle Rock and wrote Brian's name in it, going on to realize that he had made all of these bargains prior, and so he's starting fresh again, and so he needs to know who all he is to have made these bargains with, to kind of keep tabs. So Gaunt writes Brian's name in this book and then kisses it. And so then we turn to this deputy who I believe is Norris. Norris will go on to meet up with a guy that most of the time in this movie is to be called Buster, but his name is to actually be like Danworth, or some people at some point call him Dan. So I'll probably call him Dan also because it's easier. So Dan is to go on to be upset with Norris here because of a ticket, and he is upset with this ticket because it, of course, has Norris's name on it, and it's to be this traffic ticket. And eventually, as this argument continues to happen, and the deputy calls this guy Buster, which of course is to be a trigger for him, gets very upset. We have the sheriff that interjects between the two of them and is to force the deputy to apologize to Buster for calling him Buster, and that the sheriff is to mention to Dan that the sheriff had told Norris to write the ticket. So it's actually not Norris's fault, it's the sheriff's. So, but as the two of them continue to argue to almost the point of them lashing out at one another, the sheriff tries to mitigate the argument by saying, it's like, well, hey, like, you know what, I left the town because everybody had gone on to be crazy there, and I came here thinking that that was gonna happen, but I guess the crazy is gonna follow me everywhere. And like, I'm hugely paraphrasing here, but yeah, but like, he's to go on and hope that maybe him lashing out here will go on and have these people kind of much more calm down and stop bickering here. So we have Polly that gives this box to Nettie, which is to be this pie, to go over to the Needful Things store to give these guys a pie for a neighborly thing to go on and do. Even though Nettie says, "Yeah, we'll go to the store." Yeah, she's gonna go to the store and she's gonna give this guy this pie. So she also brings her dog along, Raider, because this will kind of play into the story here. So it seems that this Needful uh, this Needful Thing store is seemingly booming, and it seems that already Gaunt is seeing a number of people leave with bags of items, and he's probably making a lot of deals and offers with them. So we have Wilma, and her husband going on to find these random assortment of wood chisels or some kind of tools of some kind. They won't actually go on and buy said things, but they'll look at them and then decide to not go on and buy them. And so Gaunt goes on to explain exactly how old these things are because he has the most ancient of oddballish of things because this guy has been doing this kind of for the endless just time that he has gone on to do this thing. So that's why he has a surplus of he's got it all because he's lived through it all. So we have Nettie making her way into the store and goes on to have Nettie give Gaunt this box, and here's where the dog plays in. So Wilma, of course, is looking at the dog. The dog barks at her, and Wilma gets upset. She kind of chucks the tool item and is be like, "Well, hey, if your dog barks at me one more time, I'm gonna kill that dog." And then he's like, "Oh no, you're not gonna kill my dog," creating chaos. Wilma goes on and leaves, and Gaunt kind of chases after her. Too late, and so as people further and further start going through the store, kind of rando people, Gaunt comes back into the store and is to focus more so on Nettie because eventually Nettie is to find seemingly the needful thing that she is to want. And come to find out, her needful thing is to be this uh, little trinket of a thing, this little uh, like I would want to call it maybe a little figurine. Let's say that a little figurine. So looks kind of like a little gnome thing. I'm not quite sure exactly, but anyways, so come to find out the reason why Nettie is so fascinated by this little figurine is because at some point she had a husband who used to beat her, and they go on and they kind of show a little bit of that in this film. And at one point, her husband that she was with gone on to destroy her figurines. We see that he breaks them all and what have you. And there is some that are still in Nettie's place, but it seems that she has this one singular figurine that she's like, ah, yeah, new one, yeah. So, and so both Gaunt and Nettie both talk about this, and so we have Gaunt. Then I'm not quite sure if he takes the pie as payment or not, or logically, when we come to have Gaunt uh, do what he does for Polly, if he also sees that pie payment as like is doing what he does for Polly, kind of in the same nature of things. But anyways, so also God goes on and kind of plays around with the figurine to say that the figurine had like talked to him and is to put the figurine in Nettie's ear, and they have a little bit of fun here, and and so Gon ends up saying that the figurine is like, "I like you, Nettie," and and he says, "I won't yell at you like George did," and then they go on to show the whole husband beating up scene, and so Gaunt is to go on and be like, well, hey, I think this should definitely go with you, and Nettie's just kind of like, well, like I think I should probably go to work. Like if anything, like I'm not sure that I'll go on and like I'll break this figurine again, and so like Gaunt does go on and give Nettie this figurine. It's like, oh no, 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 like go on and take it. Like if anything, also Gaunt is to be very nice and like, well, hey, maybe at some point, sometime I'll stop by your restaurant and get a bite there, and I'll see you soon. So, as well as also, Gaunt is to ask about Polly, and no, 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 wait, 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 wait. Gaunt ends up asking about uh, Danforth. Danforth. Yeah, there we go. Uh, and then he goes, yeah, like Danforth seemingly eats there regularly. Because here is where Vaunt wants Nettie to go on and do a prank, a little deed. And eventually, what Nettie goes on and does is she finds a bunch of police tickets and slaps Norris's name on it and puts a bunch of tickets all over Danforth's house, all over the place, like plasters the shit out of it, and has a number of reasons for why the tickets are in place. Like they're all specifically like if you look at all the tickets, all of them have all their individual reasons. There's so much effort put into this. Like one of them is to just be like, well, like the reason why I'm giving you this ticket is because you're a sea sucker. I can't say the C because there's a curse word there, but if anything, you can probably figure it out. A clock sucker, a clock sucker. Um, uh, though the one thing is to actually be that he's an embezzler, and that actually is the truth. And the other one is him stealing and this and that, and yeah, like a lot of stuff is actually to be true of this character, but like the tickets go on and on forever. But that doesn't happen quite yet. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but it's kind of rather interesting. Um, but if anything, Gaunt is to want Nettie to do this deed for him to try and teach Danforth how to be nice. Uh, and for him to be played a trick on. Because Nettie is to explain that everyone calls him Buster behind his back. And so and Nettie kind of refused at first because it's like, well, my husband used to play tricks on me and I didn't really enjoy it. And but bizarrely, Gaunt says, well, hey, like, but you're going on and you're playing a trick on someone else, and maybe it's someone to be very deserving. So, uh, and no one will never know that you did it. I promise. So we now get to Brian needing to do his task, and he ends up going along with it. So Brian makes his way to Wilma's turkey farm and is to be in the midst of a load of turkeys. Brian makes his way into the turkey pin of all of these turkeys. And so he goes on and is to take a bucket, and he grabs mud and crap and he puts it into the bucket. And so the next thing we see here is Alan making his way to Gaunt's Needful Things store because Alan just wants to introduce himself to Gaunt. There's no real suspicion there. It's just like, hey, like I want to welcome a new person in the town. Like it seems that this guy is really nice, so great. Uh, like makes Alan's life a lot easier. Like there's no procedural or nothing to like explain. He just wanted to go to this new store because like, hey, meet new people. So and Alan goes to the store, and again, as Alan is to ask, well, hey, like, is there anything that you need? And Alan's like, no, I have everything that I need, and so Gon is like, oh, fair enough. Like, you're the man that has everything, I guess, or you're just completely content. So, uh, they go on. They talk about the piece of pie that Alan's fiance had gone on to send over. So, like, we can go on and probably say that Gaunt, maybe when talking to the people of this town, he had started to find out about people. But then again, also, I think that there could rationally be the fact that considering this guy has seemingly uh, almost godlike power, that this probably is to be a guy that doesn't want to go on and show all of his cards yet about how he knows all these people without not really spending much time in this town, just because he has like this power of easily knowing people. But then also he'd probably go on and kind of ask questions like he had just gone on and done with Nettie here in this movie. So also like we have Gone that is be talking to Alan, and at some point we can kind of understand how Gaunt is to eventually uh, get into intimacy with Polly by a later part of this movie, simply by certain lines that Gaunt delivers in the early parts of this film, where Gaunt tells Alan that Alan's fiance is such a pretty lady, and it's like, all right, like that's a little like kind of throwing something in there to like, yeah, I'm gonna get with her later. So and then Gaunt tells the sheriff, "Is like, you're a lucky man, sheriff. So lucky that I'm gonna get lucky with your woman." So back with Brian throwing and mud at Wilma's clothes and all of her whites, all of her sheets, curtains, whatever any of all of these white things are that Brian is just tucking all of this on. So now back with Alan and Gone here. Yeah, this thing very choppy. I think. I wish the flow was a little bit better, but regardless, like we just have to go on and just kind of explain what happens in this film. So Gaunt mentions that he wants some cheddar cheese with this pie. Don't know why, but I guess he just has a hankering. Uh, so, but the two of them are both sheriff and both Gaunt here connecting because they're seemingly the newest people in town, and that they had come from big cities, and that also Gaunt is to say to Al that that he looks familiar. Uh, yeah, I don't know why. Like maybe Gaunt is to have some ancestral connection with all of these people, so that's probably why he asks them why they look so familiar to him, because he had probably dealt with their ancestors years ago, and like the faces kind of just look the same as past ancestral whoever this person is connected to. But so the two of them mention, as Gaunt is to mention that he's from Ohio, Alan is from Pittsburgh, and so Alan goes on and says, like, I was a cop there in Pittsburgh, and I got tired of all the going down, and one day I just lost it. I hit this guy way too hard, and Gaunt says I reckon he needed some killing, and Alan says, but it was still wrong. And Gaunt says, well, of course it was. Yeah, it was wrong. So Alan never says that he kills the guy, but also, like, if you were to go on and say that you hit a person way too hard, like, maybe hitting a person way too hard means death? But Alan never corrects him either. It's like, oh no, the person's just fine, he's in a coma. No, he doesn't say that. So, like, we probably have to draw a number of conclusions here. So, cut to uh, after the two of them have had this exchange of like, well, hey, that's why I'm here. Me too. That like we both have our problems, and that's why we're here now. So the next thing we see is, as I think Sheriff is leaving the Needful Things store, we have this Reverend Rose guy, this priest Rose guy. He goes on and he wants to slap these kind of bumper sticker like things everywhere, and he slaps this bumper sticker even on one of the other churches that he's kind of having a problem with, who of course is to be Father Mihan or Mian. uh, Meehan. Mihan. I want to say Mian. Mian. We're gonna go with that. The priest that we see most of the time in this movie, compared to the guy that slaps the bumper stickers on people's place, or wherever. Anyways, so Alan makes his way to Father Mihan here, and it seems he ends up going on to getting this threatening letter because he had gone on to open up this casino, and the guy is to go on and say, yeah, I did open up this casino, but it was a charitable thing. Like, it wasn't that we were actually doing a good, like, it was in much different circumstances. We were just doing it for charity. And so they go on a long bit of rant about how, like, there is this whole uh, the Concerned Baptist Men of Castle Rock, who are to go on and mention this bit of thing from the Bible, and they throw it on there to this father's face, and say, and so we have the reverend that is to mention that it's like, well, hey, like, if they're gonna bump at me, like, I will bump back, and so on and so forth. So we now cut to Wilma at her turkey farm. She goes on to tell her husband that she definitively wants him to go on and grab one of the turkeys because she's feeling like she wants to go on and have turkey tonight. And the husband's like, well, you want turkey every night. So, and then the wife doesn't go on about like, well, like she doesn't have like a back talk to it. She just starts to continue to just walk off here. So Wilma goes on, and I guess because this sack is over her shoulder, so she can't see anywhere in front of her, which makes no goddamn sense. Her, like, yeah, the sack is right here. You could be able to see, like, seemingly from anywhere, but I guess not Wilma. Maybe she's kind of, who knows? Maybe she's kind of technically blind, or maybe she can't really see that well, but she should be able to see what's in front of her, unless some kind of blindness. Anyways, so Wilma just continues to walk, and she starts walking through all of her clothes and sheets and muddy, crappy ones. And so she is to go on like, oh my god, like she realizes that this is mud and turkey crap, and she assumes that Nettie has something to do with it. And she went on and did this because the threatening of killing her dog, of Nettie, uh, made Nettie just drove into craziness to do this prank, which isn't true. So, but that's what Wilma in her mind assumes is the lashing out from Nettie, even though that wasn't the truth. It was actually Brian, the kid that didn't know any better. So now at the restaurante that both Polly and Nettie are at. So Polly's allowing Nettie to lock up here and completely trust her. Like, you know what, you're gonna be fine. And so Nettie's not gonna be fine. She won't. So, because if anything, she'll go on and she'll get a phone call, and it'll be coming from Wilma. Shocker, right? So Wilma goes on and tells Nettie, I know what you done, you crazy bit. Uh, and so Nettie's like, done what? And Wilma's like, effing with me was the worst mistake you ever made. I'm going to get you for this. You understand? You and your mutt. And Nettie's like, you don't dare. You stop bothering me and my raider. Uh, he's a good doggy. You won't see me, or let's transition here. You won't see me coming. And so Nettie's like, he's a good doggy. Uh, yeah. So, whatever. Anyways, pushing on. So, uh, just a weird, just smattering of dialogue that's going on here. So now we turn to a guy named, I believe his name is Hugh. I believe from what briefly I saw the whole cast list, and I have to kind of have these names kind of pop into my brain as they occur. Hugh, and probably should look at the cast list now on describing the flavor of this scene. Hugh is to be at a bar, and it seems that Hugh is going to have a problem with a bartender, as it seems that uh, yeah, I believe it's I think it's Hugh. Hugh Priest. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. So Hugh is at a bar, and all of a sudden the record player is, I believe, to go on and be playing Don't Damn My Heart, My Icky Bricky Heart. If I sing any more, be copyright. Probably not. No, it probably won't, because if you actually sing and have the actual music in the background, that could be copyright. But I've done several acapella things and never got a blip of anything. So I can sing the whole song right here and now, and nothing will happen. Great. That's the thing I think that people don't get about copyrights, but whatever. Uh, you just have to do it a certain way. That makes it sound slightly tweakingly different than the former original version of it. Regardless, so we have said Hugh that makes his way to start to kick and beat up the record player. And so Hugh tells Henry, who is the bartender, like, hey man, if you don't fix this jukebox, like, just starts to kind of threaten. And so we have Dan who goes on and states how what Hugh really needs is not a perfectly operating record player. Instead, he needs a pink slip. And then Dan just starts to go on and on um, about just wild and cockamamie things that don't make a lick of sense. Uh, Dan goes on and states how uh, he has a conspiracy theory that people are to just remove mirrors from uh, from establishments and have it be a two-way mirror instead, and have a camera or a microphone like recording everybody to overhear what everyone says. So that's kind of just paranoia for this guy, but he goes on this rant about just saying all this, and it makes no sense, but Dan says it anyways. Because we just have to conclude that Dan is the craziest person out of all these efforts. So whatever, he just kind of flies out of the brain this day. So Hugh makes his way out of the store or out of the bar to make his way to guess where? Needful things. He makes his way to look at this displayer window that has this letter jacket, and he's like, "Oh wow, this letter jacket." He goes on to seemingly look at the detail of it, and every bit of this jacket is to remember Hugh of his successful past at probably being this athlete, probably football athlete from the football helmet that Gaunt has in his hands. And so Hugh wants to relive his past by getting this letter jacket, it seems, that he had lost. For some reason, I don't know. I don't quite understand why. You would think with a guy that wants to so badly um, to have wanted to have relived his past or what, yeah, you would think this guy would always have had his letter jacket, but something that probably would not go on and probably fit him all that well now, so that's probably why he threw it out. But weirdly, this letter jacket is to be tailor made for Hugh in his current state now, so that's why he's going to go on and try to get it and make a deal with Gaunt here. So Hugh had made his way out of the bar as Henry was to have taken the bartender had taken Hugh's keys because Hugh was very drunk, couldn't trust him with the keys. So Hugh was walking his way home and noticed the store. And so he goes on to make his way into Needful Things store, and Gaunt notices him and like, hey man, you're drenched. Like, let me take that coat off of you. And you're gonna be taking this coat off because you're gonna get a brand new one that is a much more better coat than this one, anyways. You're gonna end up with your letter jacket coat. So eventually there is to be the understanding that this letter jacket is to be a classic in its early 50s of beauty, warm as toast and dry as a bone. And Hugh is to state that this code is to be very similar to the one that he had in his youth. And so it's like, well, yeah, who's to believe you ever were a kid, right? Yeah, we all were. So I think for Hugh, him getting to this letter jacket is to probably remind him of his glory days, whereas now it seems that his glory days are over, and really Hugh is wanting to just kind of recapture his childhood, like we would all go on and do at some points, and just kind of watch old cartoons and old movies, and just to kind of remember our childhood, and just reflect on the fact of if something we watched as a young lad or a young lady was good or not. Anyways, so Gaunt thrusts on the letter jacket to, of course, give to Hugh. And guess what? He's probably going to go on and pay this guy, but it's like, hey, do a deed for me. So Gaunt gives Hugh this jacket. Immediately, Hugh is in his mind getting a flashback of him getting in this classic car with all of his friends that are kind of having these footballs in their hands as Hugh was driving off this bridge, and they're having a fun time just driving. So Hugh goes on and says that that flashback he just had was the best hour of the best day of his life, and Hugh breaks down and he's like, God, I loved that jacket. And Gaunt is like, well, which jacket? This one? And like the one you're already wearing? And so Hugh takes a big whiff of this jacket, and as I'm doing right now, because I have a little bit of a cold or something, I have no idea. And it's like, so Gaunt is to tell Hugh here to take charge of his life again. And so Hugh is to go on and need to do his deed, his prank. And so we have Gaunt that asks, of course, Hugh here, hey, do you know Nettie Cobbs, the Baptist lady? Because of course he's gonna have to go on and do a task here. And so God goes on and is to flip this blade because he's going to give this to, of course, Hugh here. So Hugh is going to be the one that is going to go on and kill, sadly enough, Nettie's dog. We'll see the killing go off screen, and then we'll see the skinned dog like in our faces later, because of course we will, for a number of seconds. So fast forward here to now Gaunt is to write, of course, Hugh's name into his book. And I'm sure he takes a big old whiff of the book after he writes the name in there. There also is a scene that doesn't quite make sense to me where Gaunt at some point is to be like just by himself, like next to this fire. And he bizarrely goes on and he does like this to his hand. And uh, how I'm to go on and try to maybe understand what the heck Gaunt is doing there is I honestly think because of his nails being so long, I think he's just going on and he's thrusting his nails into his own hands so he can hurt himself. Because maybe that's just the weird, goofy torture that this monstrous being of a thing likes. Because it's to be causing pain uh, to himself. Again, logically, I would have liked to have figured out like who this monster actually is, or was, or whatever, because then I can go on and much more surmise why the heck he was doing that. But if anything, whatever. I guess this just has to be a weird scene that people have to figure out or via their own minds concoct what is going on within the scene. Besides him just kind of weirdly grasping his own hands and being like, "Yeah, I'm holding my hands." Maybe he's tug of warring with his own hands. Maybe he's pulling away, like he's giving himself something to do that. I doubt it. Anyways, so cue up the Reverend Rose or Father Rose. I think his name is Reverend Rose. So Rose wants to make his way into this building, hoping that he's going to go on and have Gaunt want to put these bumper sticker things on some point of his house. And so Rose ends up asking Gaunt what exactly his religious beliefs are. And Gaunt eventually goes on to say that he's non denominational, which means that he really doesn't connect with any religion. Uh, because logically, uh, like, I guess probably Gaunt probably just believe in something, but he probably wouldn't have said that he's a Satanist or whatever. So but also Gaunt is to just go on and want to cover everything. So he's not going to let or allow this Rose guy to, of course, go on and to uh, allow this guy to put these certain bumper stickers up. But if anything, we have Gaunt that is to tease Rose with these certain items that look very how am I going to say this? Very visually seductive, I guess, in a very adult content manner of things. Where we go on and we have a painting of a woman who is seemingly none of clothing, and also we end up seeing a person who seemingly is writing a certain concoction of sorts. There's probably a reason why I said concoction, uh, because it looks like a woo. Yeah, hoo hoo dilly. Anyways, so and it was kind of really interesting for me to go on and not because it seems that Facebook is cracking down um, with certain visuals of some kinds. So I found that out. So I'm like, okay, good. I can dance around that when it comes down to me doing movie reviews. Now that I know that that exists, like I'm just waiting for Facebook to crack down even more to like trying to avoid as much copyright as possible. And maybe movie things will go on and be a thing that they copyright. I don't know. Um, Maybe memes and all kinds of images will eventually be things that they'll probably copyright out. But if anything, after it seems that Rose is to get what he uh, was seduced by, he goes on to leave said needful things, and we find the other Reverend who is to kind of peek his head into this window and find this cup, and he is to be fascinated by that. So this Gaunt guy is appealing to everybody. He goes on and he wraps up this little trinket in this newspaper and puts it into a bag and gives it to some woman. And we have also at one point where Gaunt is to go on and give this first edition book called Treasure Island to a guy named Mr. Jewett, and come to find out that first edition will eventually go on and play into a bit of the story later, where when the chaos ensues, it seems that someone will go on and steals this guy's said book as a prank will go on and have someone steal that needful thing. So here is where Gon is making wheeling and dealing with Duet, and he says, "Well, excuse me, sir. Like, if you're to go on and at some point feel hot, let me know because I tend to quite often turn up the heat." Is this to be a devil joke? So we now turn to the only person that it seems hasn't really gone on to being involved in the store, who is Polly, because she owns a restaurant. She probably has to be there all the time. So if the store has Polly not come within it, then the store will come to Polly. So Polly is going on, I guess, closing up for another night at her restaurant. And we go on to have Gaunt that makes his way to her restaurant. And so Polly ends up getting scared by Gaunt because she didn't see anyone in the restaurant, but then all of a sudden Gaunt appears and is like, "Oh yeah, I just wanted a bit of coffee and maybe a donut." And so eventually, the further and further as they go on to talk here, we have in this conversation that as the two of them try to shake hands, Polly can't because of her arthritis. And so Gaunt says to Polly, it's like, "Oh, forgive me for even like asking to do so. I didn't know." And so Polly, it seems her arthritis is over time in this movie quickly getting so horrifically bad that like she needs a way to definitively get rid of the pain, and it seems that drugs will not go on and definitively work for her, as we'll come to find. So, or she's tempted to have the drugs, but Gaunt is like, "Oh no, no, no! Just put on this necklace and you'll be fine. This amulet that has this thing that I can't tell you exactly what it is. Uh, even though you're going to go on and desperately ask me exactly what the necklace does, and I can't tell you because I just won't." So we also have when Polly's to realize that Gaunt knows about the arthritis. I was like, "Well, hey, like, how did you know about this, Gaunt?" And Gaunt says to Polly, it's like, "Well, yeah, Nettie told me. Yeah, she told me all about you." No, it's just something that he knows. She's like, yeah, I'm sure any number of these things Gaunt could just say any random other person that told him. And the funny thing of it is I'm sure most of the time these people don't back check, and like that could be the one thing where Polly could have gone on and asked Nettie, "Hey, did you ever talk to Gaunt about me?" And then Nettie could have been like, "Well, no," and then that's when Polly could have been like, like there's something weird about this guy, but I can't quite put my finger on it. But no, that never happens because at some point Nettie eventually does go on and get killed in this movie, as well as also so does Wilma. So yeah. But moving on here. So we have at one point where Gaunt is looking out the window and noticing who I believe is actually Brian, I think. Uh yeah, I think that's Brian. So we now have Danforth, and he is going on and he's watching the horse track. Dan had gone on to be talking about the horse track before, and it seems that he had supposedly had some success at the horse track, but it seems that now he is to not be having such good things going on at the horse track. So we'll eventually come to find that Danforth is actually embezzling and taking funds and stealing them to pay for his seemingly losses, hoping that at some point Danforth is going to figure out some magical way or winning ticket to go on and be able to make up the money, as well as also to get out of him being called an embezzler. And here's the bit of dialogue here that happens in the movie between both Dan and both Alan about all this. So Alan goes on to make his way to meet up with Dan, and Dan pulls out a gun and puts it in Alan's direction because Dan had gotten scared by Alan just appearing in front of him. It was very weird. That just continues to come and happen throughout this entire movie to just freak people out for some goofy reason. Because I guess a lot of people just kind of keep their doors wide open because it's a small town. So here is where Alan goes on and he's telling Dan about the state auction, and they're discussing about the budget, and so Alan goes on and is to talk about the embezzlement, and that it seems that Dan had decided to embezzle $20,000 on horse track races and is to lose that bit of money. And so Alan is to go on and tell Dan here, as Dan is to say, it's like, well, hey, like, I'll get the money back any day now, maybe 2 4 week worth of days. I'll get the money. And Alan is telling Dan, you have 4 days, 4 whole days. And so Polly is to go on and make her way through town and is to go on and overhear Dan and Alan talking. I believe this area is to be Dan's dealership, because I guess he's a car dealer, I guess, or something like that. Or no, he uh, he says that he is to be a boat dealer, because he specifically has to correct Norris when they talk about him being like a car dealer. And it's like I'm a dealer of boats. I sell boats. So Polly overhears both Alan and Dan, and kind of what Polly's overhearing doesn't quite sit right with her. And we also have uh, Gaunt that is to also seemingly be surely there behind Polly, and he just kind of like, all right, like I can use this against all these people, and I can get my way into persuading these people because I know this bit of information. So we make our way to this lighthouse that was kind of used in the early parts of this film as a scenery shot. So here is where Gaunt meets up with Brian. Is like, you know what? That deed that you did, yeah, that wasn't exactly enough. Like, you still have plenty to pay off of that Mickey Mantle card. So I'm gonna have you do another deed in my favor. And so we have Gaunt that tosses Brian this apple. And so Gaunt gives Brian a box full of apples because he's going to go on and he's going to throw them into the windows and destroy Wilma's home. That is to be his deed. So the dialogue here is you have something of mine, Brian, that you haven't finished paying off for. Uh, and so the kid is like, but you said I could have it. Uh, and so Gaunt is like, well, the deal isn't done. You see, until Mr. Gaunt says the deal is done, and throws him the apple. So Dan makes his way to the Needful Things store. He goes on and notices this little board game of a thing that says winning ticket, and it shows a bunch of horses. And Dan ends up getting this flash of being at the horse track, and he's at a point where he's seeing all these horses racing, and he's winning. And so we then have Dan who's seeing this horse track race kind of playing in front of him from this board game thing, and Gaunt sells him on it. He goes on to state like, oh yeah, this whole thing it simulates like a normal racetrack race, and what you can do is that you can take all the actual horses' names that really logically do exist that are on some horse for that day, and you can pin them to uh, these horses, and whichever one wins, that's who you pick for the horse races, and so yeah, like that is the reason why Gon attaches this game to Dan, and Dan is so consumed by it that he goes on to take this game, he brings it home, and he continues to play it so much so that at some point his wife Myrtle is to say to Dan, it's like, hey, like, shouldn't you be going to work? And Dan is like, well, I'm at work. And he's at home because he really doesn't care about what's going on besides playing this game and betting on these horses. And like, he's happy, he's winning, he whatever. So we now go to Nettie at the restaurant as she's chopping up these apples. And Wilma makes her way into the restaurant and is to eventually take this sugar and chuck it near Nettie's feet, and it breaks and it freaks Nettie out to the point where Nettie now has a knife in her hand, and like the two of them are kind of bickering back and forth. And so one of the other waitresses takes the knife out of Nettie's hand and goes on to deal with Wilma and like, well, hey, what'll it be? And Wilma goes on to mention about how she wants to go on and basically want Nettie's dog uh, as an order, and goes into real specifics about it all. So the waitress is like, well, hey, like, uh, it's either order up or get out. Like, come on. So Nettie ends up getting upset because Wilma is going on and talking about hurting her dog, so she leaves the restaurant. Both Gaunt and both Polly are there, and Gaunt tells Polly, like, oh, yeah, no, like, you just go on and you just stay here. I'll go on and I'll talk to her and I'll comfort her. And Gaunt does a really good job, but I'm sure he's like, hey, do a deed for me. Do another deed for me. I'll make you feel good by doing some crap to other people. So here is where Dan is going on and playing the horse race game, and his wife is very concerned about him not going to work. But she doesn't really go on and lay to him. She's just like, okay, all right, I'll just walk off then. So we have Nettie, and she's with Raider, and she's talking about how she's definitely gonna go on and make sure the doors are locked to just kind of protect her dog. And she looks at this figurine. So now we have Eric with his apples making his way to break this numerous windows of this house. All while Wilma's husband is actually at the barn and he's chucking all this feed, I feel. He probably could have gone on and overheard the number of windows getting broken, but I guess he just doesn't have that good of hearing, I guess. Whatever, right? So, Brian, all of a sudden, while he's grabbing these apples, in the background noise, we're just hearing this game play out as if there's a number of outs, like it's the ninth inning, down by like 2 outs to go. And so Brian is continuing to just, with his glove and apple in hand, chuck at these windows, breaking them all. And everything in this house starts to combust. The TV breaks, a number of jar items get broken, a microwave gets broken, dot to dot. There's so much that gets broken here, it's redonkulous. This whole house, I think, is now just destroyed because of all these apples. This whole box of apples. So, after Brian is to seemingly be of to have thrown all these apples, not realizing how much real damage he had all caused, he realizes he needs to get the flock out of there. So here is where Gaunt is to realize that this town uh, is to really start to have a lot of fun now, and this will start to lead to people start to do some killing. So, because we have Hugh that makes his way with his letter jacket to Raider, and he's to be talking to the dog about like, hey man, how's it going? Hey, you like the jacket? Good, because I want to keep the jacket, and I have to kill you to go on and keep it. So again, the dog is killed off scene. Everybody like, don't freak out, but I'm sure people are gonna freak out anyways because you see the dog kind of skin later, but whatever. It's part of the movie. So I've seen worse in movies. Believe me, I've seen some worse, some horrible. So uh, while Dan is going on and consistently playing around with this horse race game, we have Nenny going through Dan's place and placing all of these tickets everywhere. And the first thing we see is a ticket that states about embezzlement. And by the bottom of it, it's signed by Norris, the deputy that was fighting with him in the early part of the movie, and is to be signed Buster Keaton, which is not actually to be Dan's name. So here is some of the tickets that are to be stated in here. The first one is to state that for being the biggest clock sucker in Castle Rock. Another one is to be uh, misappropriation of town funds. Man, that word was long. Um, Stealing, so on and so forth. Like the tickets get all over the goddamn place, and after all these tickets go everywhere, we have at a certain point where Nettie is to find this recipe for the perfect apple pie, and she takes it. Aunt Emma's perfect apple pie recipe. And so here's where Dan starts going through the house and starts noticing all these tickets. And he goes into the exact same room that Nettie's in, never sees her, and as he starts ripping out these tickets, Nettie disappears from behind him and gets out of the room and completely vanishes. So, again, these people doing these crimes are to seemingly miraculously not be able to somehow get caught doing any number of these. So, here's, of course, where Nettie goes on to make her way home and goes to the door, sees her dog, and is mortified. So now we go on to have Wilma making her way back home and is to, of course, make her way to her house, realize that her house is completely effed up. And so we now have Nettie and Wilma that confront one another within this home. And Wilma is, of course, upset with her house being destroyed, assuming that Nettie did it. And Nettie is upset because of her dog getting killed and assumes that Wilma had gone on to do it. So they're whipping out the cleavers and they're whipping out the kitchen knives and they're duking it out here. So Wilma and Nettie get sliced a little bit here, and they're grabbing one another's hands, rustling here, and we get to a point where the two of them are kind of all over the place. Some of the blades start to fall out of their hands. I think uh, at first Wilma, I think, has a cleaver in her hand, but she loses it. Nettie grabs the cleaver, and then Wilma ends up getting the kitchen knife, so they kind of trade blades here. And at one point, Wilma kind of gets up these stairs as Nettie follows. Wilma kicks Nettie. Nettie falls. And so they continue to fight. They continue to battle here. Uh, they continue to slice one another up. We go on to finally, as there is ruckus that seemingly is to finally be heard by Wilmer's husband. Because again, here's the problem Wilmer's husband never goes on to hear any of the apples that come crashing through those windows. But if Wilma and Nettie are fighting, man, does he hear that conveniently. So that's another problem I had with this film. So as further Wilma and Nettie fight throughout this film, they go on to go crashing through a window and they go rolling on this roof and then they fall to their deaths with blades in their chests. And Wilma's husband is to, of course, go on and realize that the two of them are both dead. So he has to go on and call the cops to let them know what has transpired here. So Gaunt goes on, goes through his Castle Rock list, and of course starts to cross off the people who are dead now. Probably realizing he may have collected their souls in the afterlife. Who knows? But if anything, like those deals of those characters are now done with because they're now dead. So we have Polly that makes her way into the Needful Things store, talking to Gaunt here, and at some point, as they're having a bit of conversation here, Polly is to kind of be so frazzled because she's still in pain from her arthritis, and so Gaunt is to kind of dispense with the small talk here, and so Gaunt has a way to help out Dolly here by handing her a necklace, but it seems that Dan has now made his way into the Needful Things store, and so Gaunt gets a little bit distracted by all these people coming into his store. So he's like, "Well, when it rains, it pours." So Gaunt then goes on to decide to deal with Dan, and Dan has some suspicions that people are after him, and Gaunt is willing to take care of Dan by protecting him. So, uh, kind of sends him up stairs to just kind of leave him there, and eventually he'll talk to him more. So Gaunt then goes back to talk with Polly here. He goes on and gives her a necklace, and he ends up telling her that it's an Egyptian thing, and for her to go on and once putting this necklace on, she needs to have it connect to her skin. It just can't go on and connect to her clothing or have her just wear it just over her. Yeah, it has to connect to her skin. It's kind of like the other amulet that I'd watched in the Nicolas Cage, Jack Nicholson movie Wolf, where the amulet has to connect to the skin for it to work. So at a point we go on and we have Gaunt who puts the necklace uh on Polly here, and she gets a little lightning jolt, and Gaunt says it's like, oh well, it has to do with a storm, and Polly's like, what storm? And Gaunt states like, well, there's definitely a storm coming, like stating metaphorically that Gaunt realizes that there's going to be some going on in this town that he's not going to include Polly into. But yeah, everybody's going on and doing these deeds, these pranks. So yeah, there's a storm of brewing. So Gaunt tells Polly that if she just goes on and undoes her buttons to her shirt, that she'll be able to put the necklace to her skin. And Polly states to Gaunt that she can't do that because of her arthritis. And so Gaunt is like, well, hey, let me assist you then. And so he goes on, puts the necklace to her skin after unbuttoning her shirt a bit. And so we would, of course, go on to have Gaunt that tells Polly never to take this off. And I think we also get a flash of Polly seeing her and Gaunt together in some passionate intimacy. So we have Alan that makes his way to the crime scene of both Wilma and uh, both Nettie, both dead, and sees the carnage of their bodies. And we have at one point where Brian is to realize that the two of these people are now dead and that he may be the cause of it. And Alan goes on and spots Brian as Brian is tempted to want to go on and tell Alan something, but he chickens out because it's like, I don't know if I'm going to be going on and being tied to any of this, and I could probably go to prison or juvie or whatever, because I may be somehow connected to this. But anyways, so as Gaunt goes up the stairs to deal with Dan, Dan has a gun in his hand, and so Dan explains about the whole ticket thing and mentioning how Dan feels that they're after him, and so Dan needs Gaunt's advice and asking if Dan or Dan is asking if he should go on and kill Norris, and Gaunt is like, oh no, don't go on, don't kill him. Like that would be too easy for them, Dan. Like if anything, um, you should hunt them down like animals. And so the further and further they have this conversation, uh, like eventually, uh, Dan is to state how he hates the people, and that all these people are all a part of it, a part of the problem, um, and they're to be not his friends; they're to be just so-called friends, and so we have Gon who's to go on and tell Dan here. It's like, well, uh, says he came from the outside, and he needs to take over his town, and yeah. So uh, Gon is to tell Danny, it's like, well, hey, I'm gonna go on and I'm gonna keep this gun to save you from yourself. But like, Dan goes on and has this like huge rifle where he starts shooting off people with this sniper things. But also Dan was told by Gon to hunt them down like animals. So it's like, wouldn't he have had to use a gun to do that? Anyways, so but Gaunt is to tell Dan that like in the meantime of everything that he'd gone on to state him all this dialogue, he's like, well, hey, I'm laying my own plans, and when the great moment comes, uh, for everything you do, Danforth, this one is for you. So now we go to the Reverend, and both Reverend Mihan and both Reverend Rose are to go on and be over the bodies of the two deceased, and they're saying their prayers. Alan is going on, and here's where he meets up with Brian, and Brian is almost tempted to say something, but he says nothing and kind of runs off. So da, 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 uh we go on to have immediately Alan start to figure things out about this whole town. That the prank between both Nettie and both Wilma weren't done by each one another, and that Alan is to assume that if they find who was to have actually killed the dog, that they'll find prints of another person and not the actual person who was to have been Wilma. So Alan has to go on and kind of figure and put all the pieces together of this out. So Alan is to also go on and ask the guys to want to start to ask people around town if they've seen anything, to maybe think if there's a possibility that other people had committed these crimes instead of the people that we naturally assume both Nettie and both Wilma had gone on to commit said crimes. So, to just kind of rule everything out here. So, we have Norris that is supposedly to have been delivered this gift bag. He goes on and he puts his hand right in the gift bag and he'll regret it because there's a mousetrap that ends up grasping his hand and breaking his fingers, I'm sure. And so they end up freeing Norris of this mousetrap, and Norris immediately draws the conclusion that it's come from Buster because I guess Norris did not go on and read the card that was beyond the bag. So here is where Alan goes on and tries to find where Brian does, and he's successful. So this, of course, is where Brian turns a gun on his own self. Not quite sure exactly how Brian was to come to this gun, but we would probably have to consider that Brian may have gotten this gun from Gaunt, because Gaunt had the gun. Any number of conclusions we could probably draw here. But anyways, so Brian ends up talking to Alan here, stating to never go into the Needful Things store and to state that Gaunt is a monster, that he's poison, and more and more telling Gaunt or telling Alan that Gaunt is bad. And so the further and further the two of them talk, we even have Alan notice the Mickey Mantle card, takes it, starts talking about it, and here is where Brian turns the gun on himself. Alan tries to, as much as possible, talk Brian down here, and Brian says that it's too late for him. He's got to go to hell. And so, as Alan gets closer and closer to Brian, as Brian is to explain about the store and the evilness of it, we have Alan that starts to change the subject about the card and how valuable it is, and definitely won't go on and want to lose something like that. And Brian says that Mickey Mantle sucks, so Alan rushes to Brian to try to get the gun out of his hands. Luckily, the gun does go off, but does not kill Brian here. And so, but Alan is very shaken up by it, by how frightened this kid is to be of this store, this Gaunt guy, and what he had possibly gone on and done in the recent period of time. So we now make our way to having the Reverend Mihan. He goes on and he flattens all the tires of Hugh because that is to be, I guess, the deed he needs to do. And so we have Hugh that's in the bar, and he ends up hitting the record player again. Henry goes on to grab Hugh and chucks him out of the bar. And we have Hugh that is now outside the bar, and he realizes that every one of his tires are all flat now, and he immediately assumes that the bartender had been the one to have done that because who else would it have done? So Alan makes his way to Polly, shaken up about the possible shooting of this kid. I know I have to wrap this up soon because it's already past the 2 hours of this movie, but regardless, I'm trying to wrap this up as best as I can. So, Alan is shaking up about why a 12-year or 11-year-old would want to try to eat a bullet. And so uh so eventually Polly used to give Alan some bit of aspirin and further have Alan talk to Polly, and eventually they bring up the whole necklace thing, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So Hugh makes his way back to Gaunt and talks about how his tires were cut, and so Hugh goes on to state uh, that the bartender had threw him out of the rain in his beautiful jacket. Don't want to ruin that jacket. So we go on to have Gaunt that is to state that Hugh needs to resolve this once and for all, and gives him a shotgun. And this, of course, is the definitive measure of like, well, hey, Hugh's gonna go on and kill this bartender. And so when Hugh makes his way to the bar, what happens is that Hugh meets Henry with this shotgun, and Henry himself also has a shotgun. The two of them blow one another away. They both die. So back with Polly and Alan. Here's where Alan finds out that Polly has this necklace. Desperately wants her to go on and take this necklace off, and Polly refuses because it has taken her pain away. And Alan tells her that this necklace is a disease that is disguised as a cure. So we also have Alan that is very curious what is inside that necklace and is wanting to very much know. And Polly's like, no. So Polly is flashing out at Alan to say, like, well, hey, uh, what does it really matter? Like, if anything, like, this necklace is making me better. Don't you want me better? Uh, and that also that these are her hands, and and that also that Alan isn't the one that doesn't have problems sleeping at night, and she does. And then also Polly used to have oversized buttons on the phone because of her arthritis. So we have Alan that ends up getting a call from Norris, and we have Alan that tells Polly that it seems that Gaunt had never gone on and owned a prior business in Ohio. So it seems that Gaunt is to have made up a lie about him to have lived in Ohio in his past. And plus, also, I'm sure that Gaunt is probably one of those people that does lie about where prior things he had been existing in. Or also, we could realize that maybe Gaunt had had a completely different identity in that other town. So, logically, they were only looking for Gaunt's name, but actually, maybe this guy was gone by a completely different name in that other town. So, Polly is kind of weirded out that Alan had took this excessive measure to look into Gaunt, and Alan's like, well, yeah, since he has arrived here, like, there's been two murders, an attempted suicide, and it's been happening since this guy has opened his doors to his place. And Alan is thinking that Gaunt has to be the bottom of it all. And so Alan wants to go on and physically meet up with Gaunt to face him and probably ask him a number of questions. So Alan leaves as Polly used to say, well, like, why are you leaving? Like, it's pouring down rain. And Alan's like, well, good then, because Gaunt is going to be in his home, and so I can meet him there. So Alan leaves to make his way to the Needful Things store. Polly goes on to try and open the necklace, and the necklace falls off of her, and immediately her arthritis really destroys her hands to the point where she is in a horrible amount of pain. So Alan starts to make his way through the Needful Things store as it seems there are no lights on, and the store was closed. So Alan makes his way through the store to just have this flashlight on and is to start making his way and inspect this place. As Polly is desperately trying to get back to this necklace to put it back on, she can't because of her hands, and Gaunt bizarrely appears in front of her, takes the necklace, and is to help her put the necklace back on, and tells her, put the necklace back on, the pain will go away. And Polly asks Gaunt, it's like, well, what's inside it? I have to know. And Gaunt states, I'm terribly sorry, I can't tell you that. And I can't spoil all the fun, wouldn't I? So, if Polly won't know from this guy what exactly it is, then I would not go on and definitely put that necklace on. But then again, also, there are so many people that believe in amulets and medallions and all kinds of things and all kinds of placebo effects of things that actually bizarrely still work, even though they actually shouldn't. But hey, whatever floats everyone's boat. I'm sure I have probably a number of placebo things that actually do bizarrely work out for me, and I just keep them along. I just keep them for whatever reason. There's, I'm sure, to be a bunch of exercise equipment that don't actually have a real purpose to actually have it work, but whatever. Anyways, so here is where finally it seems that Gaunt is to give uh, Polly this necklace, and then is to ask her for a small favor. And Polly's like, well, what sort of favor? As Alan continues to make his way through the store. So, Gaunt goes on to state to Polly that Alan is a thief and a liar, and he's working alongside Buster, and they're embezzling, and the taxman is closing in, and so this all is to lead to Polly immediately believing in everything that Gaunt says, instead of going on and questioning every bit of it, because she's having a wedding ring that says that she's going to get married to this guy. Shouldn't she trust him more than this random stranger that has just appeared in front of her for a number of days now that she barely knows. And so, but if anything, it seems that Polly is to give in to Gaunt so much so that she has to open her bedroom to him. And we have Gaunt that says to Polly, like, you must realize how deeply pleasurable it is doing business with you, and the two of them are to kiss and be intimate within this bed. So, Alan has come to find a number of newspapers that span through a number of years, presidents being dead and shot, uh, Japan's refusal to quit, uh, giant U.S. Exploding during something trial, and then the recent Castle Rock newspaper of two people being killed, both Wilma and Nettie. So there is supposedly evidence that Alan finds here about all of these newspapers to realize that this guy has lived forever. So, as well as also in this place that Alan is to walk past, he doesn't notice these explosives, but they're there. Tons and tons of just boxes with explosives. So, Polly needed real hard evidence that Alan was embezzling. And so Gaunt was to tell Polly to make her way to his boat and she'll find money there. And Polly goes to the boat to find all these envelopes with all this money in it. And Polly realizes that Gaunt is right, so Polly's in tears. Alan will come to his boat later after calling Polly on the phone, and Polly's upset because Alan is embezzler, is a liar, is a whatever. And Polly leaves her wedding ring or engagement ring right next to the money and is to leave. And Alan gets to the boat, sees the money, sees the ring, and is to just be very upset, of course. As if all this stuff had been planted, and Alan is now seemingly look in Polly's eyes to be some kind of just bad guy. But so we go on here to have Alan be with Norris, and Alan gives Norris all of these newspapers, and is to come to the conclusions about Gaunt here. I'm trying to really figure out a way to try and get past a lot of this dialogue. And then here's where Polly calls, and Alan doesn't quite understand exactly what Polly is saying here. So Alan says to Polly, it's like, well, hey, wait for me. I'll be right there. So as both Alan and Norris make their way out of the police station, we all of a sudden have a car that goes careening into Norris's car. And so we come to find out that Dan is in his own car crashing into Norris. And so both Norris and Dan have a bit of a fight here, and the sheriff goes on and tries to break it up, also ends up needing to fight Dan. As Norris is now on the ground, Dan is to be cuffed by the sheriff to the handle of Dan's car, and the sheriff goes on and checks to see if Norris is okay, and then of course has uh, Norris take care of Dan to arrest him and put him to jail. As Alan is to go on and make his way back to his boat to see what Polly was saying was right or not. So Norris is to go on and pull his gun on Dan, and Dan starts freaking out that he's going to get killed here. But then Norris pulls the trigger, and there's no bullets. So, since there is no gun, what ends up happening is Dan ends up beating up Norris, knocking him down, and goes, nah, 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 because if Norris is to play a trick on him, Dan was to beat the crap out of him and was to go back into his car and drive off. So Dan makes his way back to his home and goes into the garage and is laying on his horn, and Myrtle, Dan's wife, makes her way to the garage as now Dan wants his wife to go on and give him certain tools so he can free himself from these handcuffs. Myrtle is kind of very much freaking out here about why she's seeing her husband with handcuffs to his car, but she gives in to giving him his tools, even though also she's being grabbed by Dan and he won't let go because Dan also just has suspicions of Myrtle. So Myrtle ends up at first accidentally grabbing a drill because of how close she is to the car, but then she goes on and gives Dan a hammer and chisel, or hammer and screwdriver, and Dan seemingly does have a way of freeing himself, and he still has the handcuffs still on his hand. So eventually we get to a point here where now Dan and Myrtle are having this argument, and Dan is having suspicions that maybe Myrtle will call the police, and because Dan can't even trust his own wife. So what happens here is Dan gets so upset that he lashes out at Myrtle, kills her with his hammer, and goes to the sink, cleans it with water, this hammer, and Dan starts to look at his face and realizes how much blood is all over it. So even to the point where now he's looking at the mirror, confused about who he is anymore, bashes the mirror, and so we now have Gaunt that is to be calling Dan, and we have Gaunt that says that he is to be Dan's master. He says, uh, "It's me, Dan, your master's voice. How's it going?" I'm like, "What the heck?" I thought that was so weird. I guess that was to probably keep people uneased by saying that by master's voice. So, so Dan admits that he'd killed his wife, and he didn't mean for things to happen that way, but it did. Uh, and that he really loved her, and Dan or Gaunt ends up saying the saying about like, well, there are those times when we hurt the ones that we love the most, and then also Gaunt is to say that he wouldn't think that Dan wouldn't do anything to someone who didn't deserve it, because again, he always has to say the like, oh, like, well, whoever has to die has to deserve it. So So Gaunt tells Dan to hop in his car to come see Gaunt because he's got something for him that'll give him a real good bang. Because again, all those explosives, Dan is going to put all these explosives on his body and put some of the explosives near the church and explode the church. He's going to do a lot of. So here is where Hugh makes his way into the bar to get killed, as well as also kill the bartender. So Dan now has these explosives that he's digging these holes and he is putting them near the graves of the church. He's going on and he's saying these prayers, and Gaunt is to overhear him doing this. And so Gaunt tells Dan, it's like, well, hey, what are you doing? And Dan says that he's praying, and Gaunt ends up saying like on my time. Uh, so Gaunt grabs Dan, hoists him with one hand up into the air, and Dan says that he was just really scared, and so we have Dan that states that if any point uh Gaunt could go on and just kind of kill everybody and just open the earth wide open and just take them all. And Gaunt says that he can't go on and do something like that. He can't perform miracles. So Gaunt says that he's not the Father, the Son, of the Holy Ghost, and that he's just a lonely guy. And so Gaunt forces Dan back to shoveling these explosives, and Gaunt tells Dan about how he's a disgusting guy and that he likes that in a person. Just the weirdest line of dialogue, but it also kind of fits with the fact that this guy is to be just this underhanded guy, and when he sees someone else who's as underhanded as he is, that he's like, I like this about you. So Dan and Norris make their way to the bar to investigate the two people at the bar who are now dead, both Hugh and bartender. We have Reverend Mihan that is inspecting this cup that he was given by Store, and Alan makes his way to Reverend Mihan to have this conversation about God and if the devil exists. And it's like, well, both have to exist, right? If you can believe in one, you have to believe in the other. It's like, well, do you believe in God? It's like, yeah, I believe in God. So they get into this whole bit of dialogue. So Alan is to go on and state that there's a possibility that the devil is here in the town, and we have the Reverend that states the devil has always been here, and that he's also always within our hearts. Saying that like what good and bad you do, like he's always judging you. So as well as also God is. So in that they need the Lord's help to go on and cast him out. It's a bunch of this kind of stuff kind of going on here, this bit of dialogue. Those of you who are not religious people or religious people, please don't go on and give me any kind of comments down below about any of this stuff. That's what I tend to avoid. And so uh, we have gone that Alan states is to be the devil in Castle Rock, and that Alan is going to need the Reverend's help to get rid of him. And the Reverend is to state that Gaunt is a decent man, and Alan is to turn to the Reverend and is like, oh my god, he got to you too? And so as Alan starts to leave here, the Reverend is to state the only devil in this town is actually Reverend Rose. And then all of a sudden, the church explodes. Not all of it, just some of it. Just the kind of area closely where the Reverend Mihan was. So Alan turns to the Reverend and is to tell him, it's like, well, hey, do you believe me now, Reverend? And you still think he's a decent man? He blew up half of your church. Uh, so, and again, the Reverend is still thinking that it's the Baptist. It's still Reverend Rose. It's not Gaunt, is what he's thinking. So, we have Alan that heads outside the church to go on and notice. Or, no, wait. There's a hole in the church where Alan is looking out and he's looking straight at Gaunt as he's lighting the cigarette, going like, yeah, I just effed your wife, and I'm gonna f you up next. Yeah, you're my only stopgap to wreaking havoc on this town. So the Reverend is to be outside the church, casting out Reverend Rose, and all of a sudden there's to be an explosion that happens that causes this church to explode even more, and we have this cross then that's going flying, almost hitting the Reverend. Uh, we have people that are to watch from the distance of the church exploding and just being destroyed. So now we have all these people in this town that are fighting one another over these random bits of things. One person had taken this book, and so people are wrestling over it. Uh, we get to the point where Alan is trying to stop these people from all of this fighting, and is telling them to go home and watch the television or something. Just kind of go to the normal day to day stuff. So Alan gets to a point where he goes to his cop car, gets out his shotgun, because he realizes that so much chaos is going on within this town that he has to go on and figure out a way to try and police it all. So there is at one point where one of these stores are being broken into, and Alan shoots off his shotgun to stop people from rioting. So we all of a sudden have this sniper gun that is to be kind of scoping out to try to find Alan here. And we have at one point where both Alan and Norris are to meet up with one another as Norris gets out of his car, and the two of them are having a bit of dialogue here. So, uh, having Alan kind of giving an update of what he had gone on to see and transpire with the church being burnt down, and that also Myrtle had been killed with this hammer. So the two of them are questioning what the heck had happened with this town, and we have a bit of chaos that is to kind of transpire within this movie, which has Norris just kind of run off here. So, some explosions had gone on to happen in some part of the store as the two of them are kind of ducking down. So Alan goes on to find both reverends are going to almost exchange blows here, and it gets to the point where Alan has to throw himself in the middle of this to stop it, and Reverend Mihan ends up grabbing this blade away from Reverend Rose and is going to like swing this like blade axe like thing. It's very weirdly shaped. So, oh, it's an axe, is what it is. So, and also Gaunt is kind of like watching all this, and he's trying to go on, and he's trying to tell everybody the opposite to what Alan is saying, like, "Oh no, kill them, let God sort them out." So Alan is trying not to have anybody kill anyone, as Reverend Mihan is so tempted to kill here. So Alan fires his gun into the air and shouts, "No more killing, not in Castle Rock, not me, not you, not anyone. This shit stops now. Listen to me, all of you. This man here, Gaunt, uh, he came here to destroy us, to make us destroy ourselves. Can't you see what's happening here? This is what he needs. Uh, this is what he wants. He's got us all tied up like a bunch of human fuse boxes." He goes on to this fuse box thing for a very long time. He goes into describing every layer of fuse box thing that was connected to all the other people. That Nettie, that Wilma, they're all fuse boxes, human fuse boxes. So we start to go on and have Alan turn and force everyone to really look into themselves and really what they're doing here and the chaos that they've caused. And we also have Alan that is to tell Cora, who is Brian's mother, about her son and how Brian, it seems, had gone on to figure out all of this, and that Brian had told Alan what was going on, and how almost Alan had gotten sucked into all this like almost everyone else did. So Alan states that all these people are all decent people. We are, and that Gaunt has played into their weaknesses and their hatred and their greed and their prejudice and their fear, or prejudgment and their fear, and he runs on hate, and he's used it to turn us all against one another. Uh, and that Wilma, Nettie, uh, Dan, Norris, uh, and then Alan and Polly end up, like, Polly is throwing both their names in the hat. So we go on to at a point where Polly is to take her necklace, thrust it down to the ground, and so everybody starts to go on and explain exactly what all they did as their deeds to confess. Everyone confesses every single deed that they had gone on to start doing here, and Rose ends up explaining he was the one that put the money in Alan's boat. So it wasn't actually to be the embezzlement, it was to just be the deed that Rose did. So Gon ends up getting upset with all these people because they don't play into what he wants. And so Gaunt is to say how everybody in this town is starting to become Alan's puppet under his control, and it's so pathetic. It's like, dude, like, kettle black here. Like, pot calling the kettle black. It's the same thing here. Uh, like Gon is just jealous because Alan had figured a way to persuade these people to stop what they were doing. And Gaunt is to also tell Alan to let them make up their own minds and what was so wrong. Uh, and so Alan tells Gaunt that he's done here. You're busted. I didn't like the whole busted thing. That was kind of stupid, but anything, I guess, is like, hey, like, I guess they couldn't come up with a phrase to say, like, you're defeated. Brr. But anyways, so Alan goes on to say you're finished in this town. And so here is where we go on to have Dan come out of the shadows as he fires into Alan's arm. And he thrusts his coat open to realize that Dan has all these explosives, that he's willing to have this trigger to detonate what we of course see here, detonate this town and blow it all up. So Dan has a lifetime full of reasonings for why he wants to go on and blow up the town, even though he's only going to blow up a house, really. And so we have Alan that is trying to go on and say to Dan to not do this and to try to reason with him. Even to the point where Alan is to go on and say, like, hey man, just take me, I'm the ringleader. Like, leave everybody alone. And so eventually, the further that Alan talks to Dan and starts to even more and more convince him, we go on to then have Gaunt that is to start to talk to Dan and even starts calling him Buster and starts ordering her around. And Dan turns to Gaunt and says, like, well, hey, you're just like all of them, like the way you sound, the way you're ordering me around, like you just sound like they do. um and so Dan is turning on Gaunt of like, well, it was you all along, yeah, cocksucker. I'll say it now because we're at the end of this here and I'm wrapping up. So Gaunt goes on to the whole sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Instead of words will never hurt me. So Dan blames Gaunt for the death of his wife. So uh, we have Gaunt that says, well, hey, don't blame it on me. Blame it on the Bossa Nova. Chevy Nova? If you guys don't know Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you won't get that reference. Uh, we go on to have a Donatello that is to try to figure out um, a thing to say, so that way he can go on and get out of the fact that everyone else says some like righteous or radical or something, and then he's like, Bossa Nova, Chevy Nova, and then like, wicked, all right, yeah. And then they realize that, like, yeah, Dan or Donnie lost that round anyways. So, but back to the movie. So Gaunt says, like, how about you take some responsibility for yourself? And so we have Dan that says to Gaunt here, it's like, well, I got one thing to say to you. Don't call me Buster. Dan thrusts Gaunt through the window of Gaunt's store, the Needful Things, and the whole place erupts and explodes. Everyone from the town scatters away from the building, and miraculously, most of the people seem to get away from this unharmed. So Norris turns to Alan and says, yeah, I guess he shouldn't have called him Buster. So, weirdly enough, out of all the wreckage, we go on to have Gaunt, who completely comes out of the building unscathed, it seems. And so God starts saying, "This is not my best work, not by a long shot." Uh, a few murders and a couple of rather lovely explosions, but I'd hardly call it a rousing success. What the hell? So we go on to say from Gaunt that uh, that Alan will go on to have a lovely family and will go on and have a son, and his name will be Bob. And Gaunt will meet Bob in the year 2053 at August 14th at 10 a.m., a nice sunny day, and the two of them will make headlines. So Gaunt walks to his car, drives away, and disappears after crossing the bridge. And so, yeah, we never know that Gaunt is to be some devil, some god, some genie, some like some apparition of ghost of some kind. We never know. If anything, people can go on and draw their conclusions because maybe they are supernatural experts of some kind. If anything, I'm going to supernaturally get myself out of here, realizing that I probably may go on and need to catch up on possibly an event that I was supposed to watch, and maybe it's probably on live right now. So, but that's because I spent 2.5 hours, well over what I probably should have, doing this video. But thank you for going on and watching this. I'm really effing tired at this point, so I don't even know if I'm going to go on and be able to be awake enough to actually watch the thing that I was supposed to watch today. But if anything, this is going to be a backup video. Thank you guys for watching this. I really do appreciate it. It seems that these videos are doing well. I'm seeing the increase of viewership consistently, which I do appreciate because I'm hoping that this is simply because I'm choosing better bits of content, regardless of the actual length that people decide to go on and watch these for. Um, I hope to continue to find better pieces of content that people are actually interested in, and also kind of play into the fact that I'm going to try and find stuff still that I am to find on the things to be trending and what have you. Like, interestingly enough, there's a lot of times where I probably should have gone on and done certain pieces, but I just keep finding these random Ash-like movies that may or may not go on and be of real interest to people, but I'm finding out otherwise, so I'm happy about that. I could just be amazed by that and just be grateful about it. So I'm going to get the heck out of here, so that way I can kind of reserve some energy to watch whatever I need to watch today and maybe do another video. But again, I probably will not be. I'm immediately already thinking that I'm like, dude, I don't think there's going to be any way I'm probably going to do another video. I don't have the energy right now to even be actually awake right now. So we'll figure that out when we get there. So goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.